buckle in. This is a long one. I moved back to Santa Cruz at the end of 2012 after completing culinary school in Sacramento. I landed a job at a local bakery and coffee shop in a nearby town called Aptos. I was the morning baker, which meant that days started at 2:30 a.m. and finished around 10:30 a.m. I both loved and hated that kind of shift. I loved being alone until the morning barista came in at 6 a.m. I could listen to music as loud as I wanted while getting the morning baking done. I didn't have anyone around to share the radio with and no one to breathe down my neck. It was actually really nice. Having to go to bed by 4 p.m. was the part that I hated. You miss a lot when you're on a shift like that, but I digress. The owner of the bakery also had a small coffee shop in the Santa Cruz harbor, so it wasn't abnormal for the baristas to work at the harbor one day and in Aptos the next. In January of 2013, the owner hired a new barista who worked at the bakery one day a week and the harbor the rest of his shifts, from what I can remember. I know he wasn't at the bakery very often. I remember the first time I saw him. He was kind of cute, but there was something in his eyes that was creepy and unnerving. Thankfully, we didn't talk much. But the next month or so, work went on as usual. Toward the end of February, everything would change. On February 26, 2013, that really creepy, albeit sort of cute barista would kill 2 cops and then die in the line of fire half an hour later. We were all shocked. The owner was a mess. We didn't know what to do or think. And that's not the end of the story, however. Finding out what happened in this incident, as well as his past, was just as shocking and surreal as hearing that he had murdered 2 police officers. In the days following the shooting, a lot about him would come to light. This is really where the convoluted nature of the story comes into play, because so much had happened leading up to the shooting, but it all came out in bits and pieces. A few days before the shooting, Jeremy Goulet, then 35 years old, had been hanging out with some work friends from the Kind Grind. While at his female co-worker's house, the group had been drinking. After everyone left for the evening, Goulet waited until the female co-worker had gone to sleep. He then broke into her house and attempted to assault her. She awoke and screamed, prompting Goulet to flee. A short time later, Goulet was picked up for public intoxication and spent the rest of the night in jail. Sergeant Lauren Baker and Detective Elizabeth Butler went to Goulet's residence on February 26th to ask him some questions regarding the police report filed by the female co-worker. The officer spoke with Goulet for a few minutes through his door before attempting to detain him. It's unclear exactly what happened next, but Goulet shot and killed both officers before taking Sergeant Baker's bulletproof vest and gun and fleeing in the unmarked police vehicle. Within minutes, he was surrounded by other officers in an alley behind his residence. A short gun battle ensued before Goulet was shot and killed. Within half an hour, 3 people were dead. But this isn't the end of the story either. There would be a lot more to learn about Goulet and what led him to that fateful day. Over the following week, the chips would fall and the following timeline of Jeremy Goulet would come to light. He joined the Marines in 1998. In 2000, he was cited in a Peeping Tom case while stationed in San Diego. He discharged from the Marines in 2002. In 2004, he enlisted in the Army as a Black Hawk pilot. In 2006, while stationed in Hawaii, he was court-martialed on successive charges of assault against women. The Army exchanged dropping the charges for an other-than-honorable discharge, which is nonsense to me. He was officially discharged from the Army in February 2007. He moved to Portland in March of 2007. And in late 2007, he was found peeping in a woman's apartment window and filming her. After being confronted 3 times by the woman's boyfriend, the man got into a physical fight and Goulet brandished a concealed weapon that he fired multiple times at the boyfriend. The boyfriend was not injured. Goulet was charged with invasion of privacy, concealed weapons charges, and attempted murder. He served 3 years and was released in April 2010. Goulet moved to Berkeley in September 2011, where he was again arrested on charges of peeping. This time, Goulet took a plea deal for 20 days in jail and 3 years of probation. At the end of 2012, Goulet moved to Santa Cruz and began working at the kind grind where the rest of the circle comes around to a close. To say we were all shocked and awed by how this all unraveled is an understatement. The bakery and coffee shop are both now permanently closed, but I don't know if that has anything to do with this story. The owner was always a little off her rocker to begin with. I've learned a few things from all this. The first thing is to be careful of who you have to spend a few hours alone with in the early and dark mornings because you never truly know what someone is capable of. The second thing is to absolutely never take someone's face value for granted. And finally, never be upset for not being someone's type. It might just have saved me from being assaulted and sparking murderous intent. So this happened in 2011 in Tacoma, Washington. I was 7 at the time and just coming out of a really trash marriage, meaning I was getting back into the dating world after years away. I met this guy, we'll call him Y, on a now popular website for meeting others. Whatever. That matters very little in the scheme of what I'm about to tell you. We matched on the site and exchanged numbers and began texting throughout the day. Y was educated, funny, and devilishly handsome. Naturally, I wanted to meet him. He told me the feeling was mutual, so we agreed to meet at the local mall for coffee. The flirtatious conversation was flowing, smiles and giggles abound, and before I knew it, I realized my time with him was up. I had to pick up my son by a certain time, and I was risking being late. No big deal, Y said. But how about we hang out again tomorrow? He asked. Yeah, sure, I'd love that. I told him as he walked me to my car. I was excited, not gonna lie. Do you know where the beach is in DuPont? We could walk around there, he said as he grinned at me. I told him to text me that I really had to get going to get my son, and he apologized for keeping me. The whole drive home, I couldn't shake this weird feeling. DuPont Beach? It wasn't exactly a stroll on the beach type beach. It was rocky and studded with driftwood. There was a small road leading down to the beach, but it seemed like a real ankle breaker to actually walk on the rocks. Y texted me almost as soon as I got home and told me how much he was looking forward to our beach date tomorrow. I responded because I didn't want to be rude, but in my mind I was freaking out. Something was not okay about this, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't that Y was a creep or even gave off any inklings of being a creep. For all intents and purposes, he seemed like a decent, friendly guy. When that nagging feeling just wouldn't go away, I made the snap choice to block him. No warning, no it's just not working for me text, just done and done. Instantly I felt relief knowing that because I lived on the south side of the town and Y lived on the north, we most likely wouldn't be running into each other. I settled back into my normal life and routine and opted out of dating for a while. Fast forward about 6 months, and one of my friends calls me and is all but screaming when I picked up the phone. You need to turn on the news now. What? What's going on? I said as I fumbled for the remote. It's the guy you went out with once. Why? I flicked on the news and sat in awe, and Y's picture flashed across the screen, and a description of his crimes were aired. Kidnapping, indecent assault. He was being held with $500,000 bond. Apparently, Y had met a woman outside of a local DuPont restaurant around 1 a.m., where she asked him if he had a cigarette lighter. He told her no, but that he had one in his car that was parked around the corner. She followed him to the car, and when he opened the back door to get the supposed lighter, he proceeded to push her in and slam the door, and leapt in the front seat himself. The woman was trapped due to the child locks being pre-locked in the car. He proceeded to drive her to the beach and assault her, and then leave her there. My blood ran cold at the thought of how Y had wanted him and I to go to that same area, and how I couldn't get rid of the feeling of impending doom surrounding it. Thank God I listened to my instincts. Let me start off by saying I'm not attractive. I'm not saying that for clout or simply to put myself down. It's just a fact of my life that I'm not all that appealing to look at. I'm okay with it, and it's not really a big deal. I was born female and happen to have a curvy body, so I sometimes get catcalled before people see my face. It's not often, so I never put myself down as someone to be targeted for harassment, assault, stalking, and so on. And I'm telling this story to remind all of you to be on your guard. Not only the pretty people get targeted, everyone needs to be wary of their surroundings. This morning, I was on my usual bus route to work, on schedule to arrive 45 minutes early. The joys of a small-town bus system. I just got off my second bus when I noticed someone walking behind me. I keep my mask on from when I leave the house to when I get home because, spoiler alert, we're still in a pandemic. I noticed the shadow of someone wearing a hood walking up behind me. They got very close to me, so thinking they were trying to pass me, I slowed down and stepped to the side. They also slowed down and turned to look at the road, like they were looking to cross. I kept walking down the road, but pulled out my earbuds and hid them in my pocket. No, I don't work in that great of a neighborhood. I work for a good company, it just happens to be in a shady area of my town. When I saw the guy pause, all my alarms went on alert, so I tried to listen for him and hide my phone and earbuds, thinking he might try and make a grab for them. I often assume the worst as a gut reaction. I ducked into a small driveway surrounded by a fence as a way to gauge if he was still following me or trying to pass me. He then walked into the driveway after me and stopped near me, then turned his head down the road as though he was distracted by the traffic. Needless to say, it spooked me to see he actually was following me. I said, "You can pass me at any time," to try and urge him to go away. I quickly went back to walking down the road, speed walking to just try and get away. I was close to my work, which has a keypad locked door, so I thought if I could walk quickly enough, I could be safe. I felt like if I had tried to run, he'd catch up to me and try something. I made it to my work's driveway and was happy to see he was a distance away. I made my way to the front door, punching in the door key, and looked over my shoulder. I saw him running at me. I tried to get the door open and go inside, but he stood right in front of me before I could get inside. I slammed the door closed, for some reason thinking that he'd try to push his way in. I didn't want him to hurt my coworkers as well. Trying to force myself to give him the benefit of the doubt, initially trying to rationalize that he might be a new employee, I asked if I could help him. The stalker was staring dead into my eyes, standing about 5 or 6 inches away from me. He was wearing a mask, but it was so tattered that I could see his mouth and nose clearly. I was just wondering if I could get your name." I'm not that much of an idiot. I wasn't about to give this guy any information about myself. I hesitated, then mumbled that I wasn't available. "I just wanted to know your name," is how he responded. "I'd like you to back up." That's what I said next. I was too spooked to think of much else other than he was standing way too close. He didn't budge, so I repeated myself, but he didn't seem fazed. Finally, I said with force, "You need to back off." He finally complied, backing away slowly. I yelled at him that it's not nice to stalk people. When he was about 20 feet away, I turned my back on him, punched in the key code, and flew into my work building. Everyone was staring at me because of how frazzled I looked and how fast I ran in the building and slammed the door. I managed to talk to my coworkers, and a friend let me borrow her pepper spray in case he decided to follow me again. My boss said that he'd look into what he can find on the security cameras in case we need to file a police report. So to the odd guy who chased and stalked me, I'm not giving him my full name, and I hope that we don't meet again. For some background, I'm a 13-year-old female. I'm very athletic and aware of my surroundings, and I think that's what saved me yesterday. About 3 months ago, I was out skateboarding like I do every weekend, and I was just going around my neighborhood. My neighborhood is a long street with many courts on each side. 3 of the streets, however, you can drive through. I was going in and out of each court, and I noticed a black car following me, and going in and out of each court behind me. I went to one of the courts that looped around and went out the other end, then onto the main road and back into my neighborhood where I was able to escape the car and get home. Fast forward to yesterday, and I was out skating to go get candy from a store near to my house and then go hang out in a mossy parking lot that was in an alley. I go out every weekend and get boba next to this alley and then come sit in this parking lot to drink and read. This time I just went into the store, got a drink, candy, and then skated over to the secluded parking lot, popping my board up once I hit the gravel road. You can go through the alley to the boba place, and a lot of cars do that, so it's not unusual to see one or two pass by the small parking lot every once in a while. One of the things that may have saved me is my grandma. Since I was a child, she taught me to be overly aware of my surroundings and be smart about what I do. I sat down first with my back open and then decided to move to where I was sitting with my back to a fence so no one could come up behind me. As I was reading, I saw a car pass by and looked up. I have this man's face stuck in my head as it's truly petrifying. I saw a man in the same car that followed me 3 months ago, except this time he had his window down and I saw his face. He was at least 350 pounds and had short black hair and a black beard. He had brown, beady eyes that stared at me as he passed by way slower than a normal car would have. I didn't pick up on the fact that this was the car that followed me 3 months ago at first, so I just thought he wanted to see what I was doing, as I am a teenager in a random secluded parking lot with 2 bags by me. I put what happened in the back of my mind and kept reading. A few minutes later, I heard a car coming up and looked up. To my horror, it was the same exact car. He went by this time in his black van, slower than he did the first time. He stared at me the whole time, and I saw someone move in the passenger side. They seemed to be hiding. They were hiding on the floor, and I saw their head pop up as they drove by. Who knows how many people were in that car? After what seemed like hours, he drove away. As soon as he did, I got out of my trance, packing everything up and booking it out of there. I went through a very small alley between the pet shop and the rehabilitation center I was behind, which led to the main road. I threw my board down and went as fast as I could home. I saw his car go out onto the main road and then turn into a school parking lot. He was either going to turn around following me, or he was going to go through the alley once more, hoping I was still there. Luckily, he went to the alley again, leaving me time to get away, and I made it home safe. I'm scared because I worry that this will happen again, and maybe next time I won't see them coming. This is something that happens constantly to me, and I'm actually at work at typing this out because it just happened again. 3 months ago, I started working at a packing warehouse. I'm the youngest one here, being only 19, and it's barely any other females here. The women's bathroom literally has only one stall, and since the virus, it's supposed to be one person in the bathroom at a time. This wasn't a problem for a while until one of my coworkers, we'll call her Jane, started following me into the bathroom. At first, I didn't care, as sometimes she would come in while I was in there and I would see her feet by the door. I just assumed she was waiting to go. Then I started to notice that she would only go as soon as I went in. I gave her the benefit of the doubt for a few weeks, up until recently when I would see her standing right in front of the stall while I was there. I could see her through the cracks, and she would just stand there still with a blank expression. I thought she was just a creep. Other people started to notice when she would literally just leave the bathroom and I would go in after her, and she would just go right back in. She only did this with me. And when I left, she would leave without using the bathroom. All around the factory, I see her staring at me. This weirds me out so bad, but she hasn't really done anything else. I mean, we've never even spoke to each other. Up until 5 minutes ago. She came in again while I was in the stall. She walked closer to the stall door and started to tap on it. She kept whispering, "I want to come in with you." I'm freaked out, so I yelled at her no. She started to raise her voice, still saying that she wanted to come in. I screamed at her to leave. I was scared for my life, thinking that she would slide under at the bottom. She just laughed and said she'll get me tonight. I'm getting off super late tonight and I go home alone. I honestly don't know what to do. I'm still in the stall, pretty shaken up, writing this now. I'm unsure of what she's capable of, but clearly, this lady is nuts. At 19, I moved out for the first time with an old friend, Nathan. We rented a 2-bedroom, basement-level apartment for a year together, and at first, things were great. It was like having a long-term sleepover with your best friend, and we were able to have our own alone time in the apartment because we worked opposite schedules. I worked a retail job during the day, and Nathan worked overnights. For a month or two, we had a good thing going. He'd work, and I'd be home, and vice versa. We'd stay up late playing video games when our schedules aligned. The first thing I noticed that was odd was my closet in my bedroom. In the master bedroom, there was a small walk-in closet, and I noticed the carpet in the corners looked as if it had been dug out by an animal. There were also several gaps in the walls along the edges of the carpet. At first, this seemed no different, really, from the general cheap apartment disarray and maintenance issues. This didn't scare me at first. I figured someone had an overexcited pup and left it alone. It started off with little things at first. I'd think I'd hear Nathan calling my name, and I'd respond only to hear that he'd already been at work for hours. Leading to our bedrooms was a long hallway that seemed to make us both uncomfortable. The hallway light would be left on as often as possible, and we laughed it off as a childhood fear of the dark. I think we were both too skeptical to talk about how we'd occasionally think we'd seen the other person walk out of the hallway, only to realize that we're alone. On more than one occasion, I'd had a friend sleep over who'd complained that they were kept awake at night by the constant flickering of the hallway light. My roommate and I tried our best to be respectful of each other's schedules. If I knew that he'd just come home in the morning and was sleeping, I'd try my best to stay quiet when heading to work. One morning, Nathan told me that while he'd been relaxing in his room after work getting ready for sleep, he'd heard footsteps in the hallway and the door to my room being shaken. At first, he thought it was me rushing around getting ready for work, but he was concerned because I was being much louder than normal. He looked over at his alarm clock and realized that I should have been at work by this time and says he decided to check on me. He opened his door and looked down the hall towards my room. He says he froze when he saw a dark figure standing outside my door. In that moment, he said he rationalized it by saying he thought I was just running late for work, had gotten embarrassed at being caught and ducked into my room. He retreated back to his room and said that he hadn't heard anything else for the rest of the day. He never heard me say anything or leave and opted to forget about it, even when I came home later and confirmed I hadn't been late that morning. As time progressed in that apartment, we both constantly were irritable and tired. It felt impossible to rest in that apartment, especially when I was alone. Nathan would sometimes chalk this up to me being nervous as a woman alone in an apartment at night. I'd spend my nights huddled on the end of the couch furthest from the hallway, tucked in a blanket under the lamp. On more than one occasion, this is where I slept, as it felt more secure than walking down that hallway to my room. I'm awoken one morning in my bed by the sound of someone trying to beat down my bedroom door. I jolt awake and ice settles in my veins. The banging on the door is desperate, and I can see the door shaking under the weight of the hits. Immediately, I'm concerned that our apartment's flooded. We've been robbed, or something happened to Nathan. I bolt out of bed and rip open my door, and once again I'm met with sudden silence in an empty hallway. Fearful I've misheard where the knocks were, I go down the hallway to our main door and check outside, and there's no one yet again. I sit down on the couch in the living room, unable to go back to sleep even if I wanted to. When I realized Nathan had been home, I chalked it up to him sleepwalking, and he confesses later that he'd had repetitive nightmares that morning, but doesn't believe that he'd been able to walk in his sleep. His room was small, and he'd taken up most of the main space with a weight set that he'd have to crawl over to enter and leave. I later had to reason as well that in the time that it had taken me to open the door, he would have had to sprint back to his room and slam the door shut to avoid me seeing or hearing it. As weird as this was, the worst was yet to come. We've had a disagreement before Nathan went to work, and I had been laying in my bed, still a little angry and watching videos on my phone until I could doze off. When he worked overnights, his job was close enough to our apartment that he'd come home for lunch almost every night. So, when I heard the door creak open at 3 a.m., I wasn't uneasy at first. I heard the various sounds of him in the apartment, opening cabinets and walking around. I roll over, upset because he is being much louder than normal, and immediately I feel my heart drop into my stomach. Nathan would always turn the lights on when he came home. It was reassuring on the nights I was in my room to see the hallway light seep through the door frame to let me know I wasn't alone in the apartment anymore. But this night, when I rolled back over, there was no reassuring light coming from around the closed door. It's pitch black. My heartbeat quickened immediately, and I messaged Nathan to ask if he'd come home, but I got no response. I strained my ears to listen, and what I hear sounds nothing like normal. There's footsteps running around the apartment and coming down the hall to my door, then running away. Doors opening and closing and cabinets creaking. In that moment, I was so absolutely sure we were being robbed, and I began to cry. I didn't know how to deal with this, and what I'd heard sounded so angry and chaotic outside my door. Tearfully, I grabbed a knife that I kept under my pillow. Because the apartment walls and doors were so thin, I couldn't have called 911 quietly enough to save myself. My instinct in that moment was to fight and deal with the consequences later. I stood just behind my door, listened to the footsteps run towards me, braced myself, and when I heard them start to fade down the hall, I ripped open the door to surprise my attacker. I'm met with absolutely nothing but silence and darkness. I stared down the black, empty hallway, adamant that they're hiding from me. I'm frozen in place, staring down the hall, waiting to hear anything. The front door is in clear view from my position, and it's still closed. Whoever it was has to still be here. I scan the room at the end of the hall. I feel a lump in my throat as I lock my eyes on a large, dark figure peering around the corner at the end of the hall. I take off down the hall and whip around the corner, ready again to fight, but there's no one in my apartment. When I turn on all the lights and check, the door was shut and locked. All the windows are locked. Nathan's room is empty and there's nothing out of place. All the cabinets and drawers I'd heard being ripped open are closed, all the tables still upright. My body in this moment reacts in a way I wouldn't expect. I go from overwhelming fear to complete calm. I shove what's happened to the back of my mind, walk in my room, lock the door and go to bed, dead asleep within seconds. To cope, my brain shoved this memory to the depths, and it only resurfaced months later after I had moved out when Nathan and I finally divulged all of our experiences together. For the remainder of my time in the apartment, the tiredness and irritability continues. Even my sanctuary of the living room is compromised, as I would awake many times in the middle of the night to see a dark figure walking out of the hallway towards the couch, disappearing when I turned my head to look. Things would fall over. I'd hear knocks on my bedroom door, and more I was questioning my own sanity. Eventually, when I couldn't take it anymore and things financially weren't well with the apartment, I decided to move back home. Within a month, I was back to feeling like myself again. We're still not entirely sure what was in that apartment, but we have some theories. I feel it's important to preface our theory with this. Not too long after moving into this apartment, I had taken to practicing Wicca and paganism. I don't say this to add horror, but rather to explain what we believe happened. In my early practicing, I would fill my room with cleansing materials like quartz stones and sage to cleanse before spells and maintain an energy in my room. We suspected whatever was in our apartment had originated in my closet, and that whoever was in my room before had done something sinister in there. The rips in the carpet and the gaps in the walls with small objects just had a view of the flashlight. We were too scared of fines that we would get for destroying the closet to lift up the carpet and check what may have been underneath. It's been theorized that I had unknowingly driven whatever darkness lived in that closet out, and it spent the rest of the time I lived there desperate to come back in. The longer it was kept out, the angrier it got, and the more we took it out on each other. Later, when I moved out, things continued to worsen for my roommate, who remained. He was constantly tired and angry and fell into a dark headspace. The spirit was able to get back in my room after I left, and the girl who lived in my room after me said she was plagued with nightmares and had been locked out of the room on many occasions, even though the door locked from inside. She'd try it and the door would be locked, then later she'd try it again and the door would somehow open. Nathan would send me videos of doors opening in the apartment on our own, and the TV suddenly showing black and white cable static in the middle of DVDs and YouTube videos. My roommate was able to move out of the apartment a while ago, and we've both been doing better. Slowly, as time has gone on, we've shared a lot of our experiences had in that apartment with each other, and both are glad that we came out of it okay. It made quite the believer out of my roommate as well, who remained reluctant to acknowledge it until his final few months there. Apartments are funny places. You never really know how many people have lived their lives in that exact same space, what they may have left behind or done in the room where you lay your head at night. Maybe there was something in that apartment, something left over from whoever came before. Or maybe it can all be chalked up to late nights, bad dreams, and miscommunication. In the end, what you choose to believe is up to you. I hope this helps any girl that feels stuck in a relationship. This was unfortunately a pretty long relationship that has stuck with me in bad ways. I'm gonna call him C. I wasn't looking for a relationship when I met C. He was so sweet when I met him, very gentlemanly and very handsome. The honeymoon of our relationship was fantastic, as they always are, but when it was over, boy, it was over. I didn't have a job when we met and received one later down the road. So full-time job, full-time college student now. He would ask when my shifts started and ended. I had to text him throughout my time in class or at work, or he would freak. I would tell him I couldn't text, but it didn't matter. He actually came up to my college when the class had a break, sat next to me in class because I wasn't answering his texts. He didn't want me to give any attention to my friends, especially my male friends. One of my male friends I'd known since I was 4. I actually blocked him and quit talking to him because C asked. He had succeeded in isolating me from everyone. If he came and visited me at work, it was always bad. A customer would smile at me or be too nice, and it would be a massive fight when we got home. Yelling, I mean yelling. The type you can't understand the person, they are so angry. I received that every day. I remember him shoving me, pushing me down, hitting something I was sitting by, even him punching holes in walls. I was horrified of this guy. I was always fiercely loyal to him, yet he always accused me of cheating. I couldn't interact with a man of any age at all. I was terrified to leave him. He had made threats against me before. I remember a time during a fight where he stopped, walked up to me quickly, and yanked me into a hug. The way he did it and looked at me made me burst into sobs of fear as soon as he touched me. Mind you, this man was my dream guy. He held doors open for me, always surprised me with thoughtful gifts, and was incredibly affectionate and shared interests I had. I went from loving him to fearing him with every fiber of my being. I lived by my folks. They never heard us fight. I have no idea how. If they came over during a fight, he would flip a switch and become that old guy I loved. I felt alone. If I tried to bring it up with anyone, they'd mentioned he was so sweet, I must have just done something wrong. My own father stood up for him so much. Eventually, the evils shown through my dad helped me kick him out. It was awful. He texted me telling I never loved him. I wouldn't have done this to him if I loved him. When the text almost vanished, I thought it was over. I was again very wrong. This man would drive by my house twice a day. If I was gone, he'd tell me so, ask me where I was, and even tried to find me a few times. As I know this is a very long post, and it's very short to describe all the things I've experienced, I'll wrap this situation up. I met a man that was wonderful. C stalked and threatened him as well. With this man's help, I ended that situation. He told me how nothing I did made him treat me that way. It was C that was in the wrong. He told me I wasn't alone in this, and I didn't have to just take the abuse that I was still receiving, that there was always a way out. All I had to do was reach out. C really changed me, in many ways. I'm not the same anymore. If anyone shows any aggression towards me, I don't cower. I become stronger. This man put me through absolute hell, and I made it out to the other side. Please, please, ladies, do not let yourselves be stuck in this. There is a man out there that will love you for the beautiful woman you are and won't try to cage you. Stay free. Never change the beautiful person you were meant to be.
I see him in front of me, on a chair, looking in my direction. I cannot move. He smiles at me. He must be enjoying this. It's as if I'm trapped in a cage. I'm strapped to this tether, stuck, sitting. I can't do anything. There is no point. I'm anchored here. What burns me more is the fact he was no stranger. He knew me. I'd known him for years. I saw him around. I trusted him. Even loved him at some point. Yet now, my heart is still beating without the emotion that once ran through. I am cool, mechanical. Ice runs through my veins. Every beating is pain. To think he was capable of this, the way he effortlessly carried it out. The audacity of him to restrict me. Was any of it real? Was he pretending the entire time? You have been planning this the whole time. This backstabbing, this betrayal, this disloyalty. I shed tears. He's laughing now. Why are you crying? Is it that bad being here with me? He chuckles to himself. Yet I believe I see a tinge of melancholy and hurt in this. I don't respond. I am briefly silent. Until when I ask if he's done this to anyone else, he says nothing. He looks puzzled. No one has ever made me do this before. He looks towards me with a look that appears warm. Guess that means you're special to me, huh? There is no clock. The LEDs shine brightly on me, the harsh light revealing the hopelessness of the situation I'm in. The ties laid bare for no one to see, the scratches apparent on his face. It could have been hours or days. Every second feels like a minute, and every minute is suffering. I don't know how long it's been. I hate him. I cry tears. Rivers flow in streams down my face. They're cold and leave me with a chill. I want to be numb. I don't want this. I'm crying. I don't want to be here. I hate this feeling. I hate any feeling. I don't want this. I wanted to die. I still do. But he won't let me. He's stopping me, keeping me alive, feeding me, nurturing me, torturing me with a life that is desperately unwanted. He said he would support me, but he has forced me into this situation and tied me when I fought him for the rejection he made me suffer with. The blade was in my hands. I was ready, but I was careless. He saw me, tried to stop it. I could not let that happen. The blade didn't reach him when he tried to restrict me, but my nails did. The color of freedom from this place running down his face made me jealous. I wasn't trying to help him. I was trying to make me free. He didn't deserve it. I went in a second time with a razor, trying to scare him so I could resume my escape attempt. But he managed to disarm me and bind me. I despise every fiber of him, feeding me, watering me, letting me grow instead of weltering. I can't believe he would keep me here. in this plane of existence. I hear the sirens outside and see the flashing lights. They are here to take me away. But that's not where I wanted to be taken to. I wanted to ascend, but he tore off my wings. I give him a look as they strap me down, imbuing it with all my hatred of him and this life. The hatred I feel is so vast. I hate him and everything in this existence. I feel like a corpse with life. I'm strapped in a coffin, strapped to wheels, stuck, not able to move. Yet my soul is also bound here. Unlike a corpse, I was not given the luxury of death. I desired that pleasantry so much, but he didn't let me indulge.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join a live stream to catch an invite to the Discord. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, fish oil sometimes spoils in the capsule.